There are royal tiaras that were never meant to leave their families. They were expected to remain, quietly carried from one generation to the next. And yet, they did leave. Not always suddenly, not always loudly, but in ways that still feel unsettled. It is a difficult thing to consider, because once that choice is made, there is often no way to reverse it. So how does it happen? And why are some of the most important pieces the ones that slip away? Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. The Alexandrine diamond drop tiara does not immediately feel like a piece that would ever leave the Danish royal family. It is small, personal, almost intimate in scale. The design features a delicate framework of sweeping arches, each suspending dozens of tiny, teardrop-shaped diamond briolets that catch and reflect light with even the slightest movement. Created around 1912, it began as a deeply personal gift from King Christian X to his wife, Queen Alexandrine, likely to mark their accession to the throne. It quietly moved down the royal line until 1958, when King Frederick IX presented it to his eldest daughter, the future Queen Margrethe, for her 18th birthday. For Margrethe, this tiara held a unique significance. She returned to it again and again during her early years, long before the grand emeralds and heavier ceremonial pearls took over her royal wardrobe. It followed her through the 1960s, accompanying her to the wedding ball of King Constantine II of Greece and numerous state visits across Europe. We see her wearing it constantly in photographs from that era, securing its place as an intensely personal visual marker of her youth and her careful transition into her role as sovereign. And that is precisely what makes her later decision regarding this tiara so quietly striking. In 1995, her younger son, Prince Joachim, married Alexandra Manley. The arrival of a new royal bride sparked an overwhelming wave of public and familial enthusiasm. Queen Margrethe clearly wanted to express a profound welcome. She chose to give the diamond drop tiara to Alexandra as a wedding present. Queen Margrethe bypassed the standard protocol of offering a lifetime loan from the royal vaults, choosing instead to give the tiara outright. Alexandra wore the diamonds for her wedding ceremony at Frederiksborg Castle Church, and it remained the sole tiara she used throughout her time as a working member of the royal family. It is easy to understand the warmth behind the gesture. Sentiments, however, rarely account for the unpredictability of human relationships. When Joachim and Alexandra separated and eventually divorced in 2005, the hard truth of that unconditional gift surfaced. Because it was a personal present, the tiara belonged entirely to Alexandra. One of the most recognizable symbols of Queen Margrethe's own youth simply packed up and left the royal court alongside her former daughter-in-law. Alexandra remarried in 2007, assuming the title Countess of Frederiksborg, yet she has maintained close ties to the extended royal family. She still brings the diamond drop tiara back to major family celebrations. For Queen Margrethe's Ruby Jubilee in 2012, she paired the diamonds with a stunning red gown featuring a mandarin collar, a beautiful nod to her own Chinese heritage. Seeing it worn by an independent countess carries a distinct, lingering tension. It serves as a glittering reminder that a single, generous impulse can permanently sever a royal family from its own history. The tiara will likely be inherited by the Countess's sons, Prince Nikolai and Prince Felix. There is a chance these diamonds might one day find their way back to the main royal line. For now, however, this deeply personal piece of Danish royal history remains firmly outside the palace walls, a lasting consequence of a gift that simply could not be taken back. While a generous gift can lead to a royal tiara slipping quietly away, sometimes a departure is entirely out of human hands, dictated instead by the cold mechanics of the state. In January 1959, Princess Margaret made what might be the most astute royal jewelry purchase of the 20th century. Acting on the advice of Lord Plunket, she acquired the magnificent Poltimore tiara at public auction for just £5,500. Created by Gerard in the 1870s for the second Baroness Poltimore, the piece was a masterclass in versatile Victorian craftsmanship. It was composed of a graduated line of cushion-shaped and old-cut diamond clusters, alternating with diamond-set scroll motifs, and it could be cleverly dismantled into a diamond-fringed necklace and 11 separate brooches. Margaret debuted it during the Iranian state visit to Britain in 1959, but her 1960 wedding to Anthony Armstrong Jones at Westminster Abbey truly cemented the tiara as her personal signature. Paired with a beautifully clean, architectural Norman Hartnell gown, the sheer scale of the Poltimore tiara suited her famous 1960s bouffant hairstyles perfectly. It became the visual shorthand for her glamorous, somewhat rebellious edge within the royal family. She wore it constantly through the ensuing decades, bringing it out for numerous state banquets, foreign tours, and official portraits right up until her final tiara events in the 1990s. This lifelong connection culminated in that unforgettable 1962 portrait taken by Lord Snowdon, showing the princess wearing the towering diamond tiara while sitting in the bathtub. That intimate, rule-breaking photograph captured the brilliant, defiant spark of her youth, a radiant era that would eventually collide with the harsh legal realities following her death in 2002. When Princess Margaret passed away, her children, Lord Linley and Lady Sarah Chatto, faced a staggering inheritance tax bill. The British tax system makes no exceptions for historical sentiment or royal provenance. To settle the estate, millions of pounds had to be raised. I often wonder if this loss could have been prevented with different early arrangements or financial trusts set up decades prior. Given the strict parameters her children inherited, however, their hands were effectively tied. It could not have been an easy choice to make. They managed to save many significant, deeply personal pieces from their mother's collection, which I explored in a separate video on this channel, but they simply could not keep everything. To protect a fraction of their mother's legacy, they were forced to sacrifice its most iconic symbol. The Poltimore tiara was sent to Christie's in London, headlining the famous 2006 auction of Princess Margaret's estate alongside 800 other lots. Bidders drove the price up to £926,400, nearly 5 times its highest estimate. It is incredibly sad that such a trademark piece of royal history vanished into a private collection, unseen by the public ever since. There is a popular, rather comforting theory that Queen Elizabeth II secretly intervened through an agent and purchased the tiara to keep it within the Windsor family. As much as I would love to believe that this magnificent piece is simply resting quietly in the royal vaults, waiting for the next generation, the reality points elsewhere. Reports often suggest that the tiara went to an anonymous Asian buyer. The fact that the Poltimore tiara has not surfaced in any capacity since that day, not worn by another royal, and not loaned to a single museum exhibition for public viewing, casts severe doubt on the romantic theory of a secret royal rescue. The crown could not save it from the taxman, and private wealth swallowed it whole. Its complete disappearance serves as a quiet, painful lesson to the monarchy that even their most famous diamonds are never truly insulated from the outside world. The highly publicized auction of the Poltimore tiara felt like a sudden, sharp shock to royal watchers, but jewels often leave their families in a much quieter fashion. Decades before the taxman forced the hands of her children, Princess Margaret orchestrated a few highly discreet private sales of her own. She quietly parted with pieces like Queen Mary's amethyst tiara, and as we only recently discovered, she also sold a delicate diamond and pearl piece known as Queen Mary's lozenge bandeau. Bearing faint Cartier maker's marks and dating to the early 1910s, this bandeau features distinct diamond lozenges set within fine scroll motifs, bordered closely by seed pearls. Queen Mary loved wearing it for evenings at the theater, often topping it with large, upright pearls from her other tiaras for film premieres like The Ghost Goes West in 1935 or ballet performances at Sadler's Wells. She eventually passed it to Margaret, evidently as an 18th birthday gift. Margaret chose it as her very first tiara, wearing it to the inauguration celebrations for Queen Juliana of the Netherlands in Amsterdam in 1948, and continued to wear it for state visits throughout the 1950s. By the late 1960s, it simply stopped appearing. For over half a century, everyone naturally assumed this lovely little bandeau was fast asleep in the royal vaults in London, waiting for a new princess to wear it. It turns out the tiara was actually thousands of miles away, living a vibrant new life. In 1988, Princess Chulalongkorn of Thailand happened to notice a diamond bandeau for sale in New York City. Recognizing its sheer quality, she contacted Crown Princess Aziza of Pahang, advising her to purchase it. The tiara was promptly shipped to Malaysia, where it became a cherished fixture in a completely different royal court. Queen Aziza has worn it for official portraits and state banquets, and she even allowed her young daughters to wear it for school sports days and their 21st birthdays. This quiet transaction remained a complete secret until very recently, when eagle-eyed royal watchers noticed the striking visual similarities and contacted the Queen of Malaysia, who enthusiastically confirmed the match. While it is undeniably sad to see a piece of British royal history leave the family's vaults, I find a real sense of comfort in its current trajectory. It could easily have vanished into an anonymous private collection to gather dust. Instead, it quietly crossed the world to find a home where it is actively loved and worn by a new generation of reigning royals. We see a similar survival story with another famous design, though its journey was much more public. Whenever we hear the name Lover's Knot, we instantly picture the heavy pearl and diamond tiara so frequently worn by Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Diana, Princess of Wales, before her. We know that piece inside and out. That British tiara, however, is a 1913 Garrod replica commissioned by Queen Mary. The original ancestor, the true Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, has a distinctly different history. It was created in 1818 as a wedding gift for Princess Augusta of Hesse Castle when she married the Duke of Cambridge. The original design features those signature pear-shaped pearls suspended within diamond lovers' knots, passing down through the family until it reached Crown Princess Udio of Montenegro. Following the abolition of the Montenegrin monarchy, Udio spent the rest of her life in exile. Facing the harsh financial realities of a deposed royal, she quietly sold the original Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara at some point in the 1920s. For decades, it completely vanished from the public eye. Unlike the Poltimore tiara, which disappeared into an anonymous collection and has yet to resurface, the original Lover's Knot eventually stepped back into the light. It appeared at a Christie's auction in Geneva in 1981, where the German aristocratic von Waldburg-Zutzeil family purchased it for 280,000 Swiss francs. Today, it regularly graces grand aristocratic wedding balls in Germany, worn beautifully by the current Princess von Waldburg-Zutzeil. It serves as a wonderful reminder that a sale does not always equate to a tragic end. A private sale or an auction block can sometimes act as a bridge, safely carrying a historic masterpiece from one noble family directly into the care of another. However, the open auction market is rarely so accommodating. Sometimes, a sovereign state sincerely tries to reclaim its own heritage, only to be outmatched by the sheer financial force of private capital. We see this dynamic play out painfully with the sapphire and diamond tiara of Queen Maria II of Portugal. Queen Maria II navigated an intensely turbulent era. Born in Brazil, she inherited the Portuguese throne as a young girl and ruled through a period defined by political instability and civil wars, eventually passing away in childbirth at just 34 years old. During the 1840s, she commissioned a striking tiara featuring the Portuguese national colors of blue and white. The craftsmanship is highly versatile, composed of 9 numbered, detachable elements set with over 1,400 old-cut diamonds and 5 exceptional Burmese sapphires. The stones lack any heat treatment, and the largest sapphire measures nearly 20 millimeters across. The base can even be worn alone as a small bandeau. Queen Maria frequently favored wearing the full structure closed at the back of her hair, as recorded in a beautiful 1846 portrait by Ferdinand Krumholtz. Following her early death in 1853, the tiara passed to her 5th child, Infanta Antonia, who married Prince Leopold of Hohenzollern in 1859. The jewel crossed into Germany and remained closely held by her descendants. We saw Princess Margaret Carola of Saxony wear it low across her forehead in the 1920s, perfectly fitting the bandeau fashion of that decade. Its last public royal outing came when Princess Birgitta of Sweden wore it alongside the Hohenzollern sapphire parure during the wedding celebrations for Queen Margrethe of Denmark in 1967. Following that single event, the sapphires retreated completely from the public eye. For over half a century, the tiara quietly sat in the Hohenzollern family vaults. That long silence broke in May 2021, when the princely family placed the tiara up for auction at Christie's in Geneva. The initial auction estimate was set modestly between 170,000 and 350,000 Swiss francs. This presented a rare, highly anticipated opportunity. The Portuguese government officially entered the bidding, intending to buy the tiara and return it to Lisbon to sit permanently alongside the rest of the nation's historic crown jewels. Bringing the piece back to the Ajuda National Palace felt like the perfect, just resolution for a scattered piece of history. The auction room operates strictly on currency, completely immune to historical sentiment. A rapid bidding war drove the price far beyond the estimates, and the hammer finally fell at a staggering 1.77 million Swiss francs. The buyer was an anonymous private collector. The Portuguese state simply could not compete with that level of immense private wealth, losing the bid entirely. The new owner did offer a small temporary consolation. They allowed the sapphire tiara to go on public display at the Portuguese Crown Treasure Museum for exactly 1 year. Visitors finally had the chance to see Queen Maria's Burmese sapphires glittering under the museum lights. Yet, that brief window of visibility quickly closed. The exhibition ended, the display case was emptied, and the tiara traveled right back into the darkness of an unknown private vault. Having this masterpiece return so briefly to Portuguese soil, only to watch it pack up and leave once again, leaves a rather sharp sense of loss. It shows exactly what happens when a country's history goes head-to-head with the modern open market. The loss of the Portuguese sapphires into an anonymous private vault feels like a rather harsh defeat. The open market, however, occasionally provides a more optimistic resolution when a royal family decides to sell a masterpiece. We see this slightly softer landing with one of the most intimately significant pieces in British royal history: Queen Victoria's sapphire and diamond coronet. Prince Albert took a very active role in designing jewelry for his wife. In 1842, he commissioned Joseph Kitching to create a small, flexible coronet featuring cushion and kite-shaped sapphires set alongside diamonds in silver and gold. Queen Victoria wore it for her famous 1842 portrait by Franz Xaver Winterhalter, pairing it with the large sapphire cluster brooch Albert had given her the night before their wedding. The coronet soon took on a weight far beyond its delicate physical size. Following Albert's death in 1861, Victoria famously retreated into deep mourning. Conventional wisdom often suggests she completely abandoned colored gemstones during this period, but she kept this specific coronet in active rotation. When she finally agreed to attend the state opening of Parliament in 1866, her first since becoming a widow, she declined to wear the heavy imperial state crown. Instead, she chose to wear Albert's small sapphire coronet, perching it directly atop her white lace widow's cap. The coronet passed down the direct royal line to King Edward VII and then to King George V. In a lovely shift away from the sovereign's vault, King George V and Queen Mary presented the coronet to their only daughter, Princess Mary, Princess Royal, as a wedding gift when she married Viscount Lascelles, the future Earl of Harewood, in 1922. Princess Mary cherished the sapphires, wearing them for decades. Following Princess Mary's death in 1965, it continued to appear on the heads of Harewood brides and countesses well into the 1990s. Eventually, the financial realities of maintaining a vast estate took precedence. Following the death of the 7th Earl of Harewood in 2011, the family quietly sold the coronet to a London dealer. In 2016, an anonymous foreign buyer purchased it for £5 million. The British government suddenly realized that Queen Victoria's coronet was on the verge of leaving the United Kingdom permanently. The Ministry of Culture immediately intervened, imposing a temporary export ban to buy enough time to find a domestic purchaser capable of matching the exorbitant price. The rescue came from William Bollinger, a wealthy financier who purchased the coronet and generously gifted it directly to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. It now sits in the permanent jewelry gallery, completely secure and accessible to the public. I must admit that looking at this coronet safely behind museum glass carries a slight note of melancholy. There is a quiet sadness in knowing its days of actually being worn are entirely over. Yet, if a jewel as profoundly personal as Prince Albert's gift to Queen Victoria had to leave the royal family's private collection, resting permanently in the museum that bears their very names, feels like a remarkably fitting conclusion. But there is a much darker scenario. When a state actively decides to dismantle its own heritage out of political fear. By the 1870s, the French Third Republic was highly sensitive to rising monarchist movements. Politicians began circulating a rather ruthless idea: without a crown, there is no need for a king. They decided the most effective way to prevent a royal restoration was to physically liquidate the French crown jewels. In May 1887, the government gathered centuries of history inside the Pavillon de Flore at the Louvre. The sheer scale of the destruction is difficult to fully comprehend. Surviving historic crowns were methodically stripped of their precious gems, the empty settings filled with worthless glass before being shipped off to provincial museums as mere historical oddities. Magnificent floral stomachers and complete diamond parures were broken apart and grouped into bulk lots. International jewelers flocked to Paris, with Tiffany & Co. alone purchasing 24 of the 69 lots to take back to America's Gilded Age millionaires. Moving from a quiet private sale to a state systematically breaking apart its own art feels like a profound escalation in the way history is lost. Yet, amidst this organized vandalism, a few masterpieces managed to escape the jeweler's pliers intact. Empress Eugenie's pearl tiara was one of these rare survivors. Commissioned by Emperor Napoleon III in 1853 to celebrate his marriage, the piece was constructed using historic stones previously worn by Empress Marie-Louise and Princess Marie-Therese. The design features 7 stems of large, superimposed pearls, alternating with pelt-shaped cartouches, drawn with intricate diamond foliage and bordered by rows of pearls. At the 1887 auction, the tiara sold for 78,100 French francs and soon entered the incredibly wealthy Thurn und Taxis family. It enjoyed a brilliant second life in Germany. Archduchess Margaret Clementine wore it for decades, and much later, Countess Gloria von Schönberg-Glauhau wore it for her 1980 wedding to Prince Johannes of Thurn und Taxis. She even paired the pearl tiara with a towering wig and an extravagant Marie Antoinette costume for a famously lavish birthday ball in 1986. Following her husband's death, financial pressures forced the family to send the tiara to Sotheby's in 1992. At that auction, the story took a seemingly perfect turn. The Friends of the Louvre acquired the tiara, bringing Empress Eugenie's pearl crown right back to the Galerie d'Apollon. For over 30 years, it stood proudly in the display cases as a victorious survivor, a piece of French history successfully reclaimed. That long, triumphant return makes its ultimate fate so deeply devastating. On a Sunday in October 2025, thieves arriving on motorcycles executed a brazen 7-minute heist at the Louvre. They smashed right into the high-security display cases in the Apollo Gallery, snatching 9 priceless items. While they drop Eugenie's ornate gold crown on the street outside, leaving it damaged, the pearl tiara disappeared alongside Empress Marie-Louise's emeralds and the Orleans sapphires. Art recovery experts rightly call this a national disaster. Because pieces this famous are entirely impossible to sell intact on the open market, the thieves have almost certainly dismantled them. There is a very bitter irony here. A magnificent tiara that miraculously survived a deliberate, state-sponsored political purge in 1887 was ultimately reduced to nothing by a crude, 7-minute smash and grab over a century later. The destruction of the French crown jewels was a highly public spectacle, executed by a government in broad daylight. Yet, the most absolute losses happen in the dark, where there are no auctions and no open markets, only the total collapse of an empire. When we trace the final path of Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna's Boucheron pearl coronet, we move past political decisions and enter a space defined entirely by desperation and betrayal. Let us go back to a much quieter moment. On July 17, 1894, exactly 24 years to the day before their gruesome assassination, Tsarevich Nicholas of Russia attended an audience with a Boucheron representative at Windsor Castle. He was visiting Queen Victoria, the grandmother of his future bride, and selecting engagement gifts for Princess Alex of Hesse. He selected a petite, exquisite coronet. The framework featured 497 diamonds set into an intricate floral and scroll design, surmounted by 18 teardrop pearls. Following their wedding, Alexandra possessed one of the largest jewelry vaults in the world, yet she returned to this modest piece constantly. We see her wearing it in formal 1898 portraits, in quiet 1906 photographs with her son Alexei, and during the Romanov tercentenary in 1913, frequently pairing the diadem with large pearl drop earrings. Following the Tsar's abdication in 1917, the grand state regalia, historic pieces like the diamond kokoshnik and the pearl drop tiara, were sent to the imperial treasury in St. Petersburg. The Boucheron coronet, however, was Alexandra's private property. She took it with her when the family was forced into exile in Tobolsk, Siberia. Knowing their lives and their property were entirely unsafe, the imperial family attempted to secure their remaining legacy. They entrusted their personal jewels to a local priest, Alexei Vasilyev, and a few nuns, including a woman of humble origins named Marfa. The gems were packed into 2 wooden vats and 2 glass containers, then buried deep in a local basement. We now know from the archives that the family's trust in those final days was severely misplaced. The Romanovs managed to smuggle several personal jewels out of their confinement, but the protective circle around the family had already fractured. The priest simply kept some of the treasures for himself, while a local writer took a pearl necklace belonging to Grand Duchess Olga, whose wife was later seen wearing it in public. The harsh reality of survival began to pull the imperial collection apart long before the final days in Yekaterinburg. The hidden stash remained underground for over a decade. In 1933, the authorities uncovered 2 of the buried cases. They meticulously photographed and inventoried 154 items before the entire lot mysteriously disappeared once again on a journey to Moscow. Yet, if you look closely at those detailed 1933 photographs, the delicate Boucheron pearl coronet is completely absent. Its exact fate remains an unresolved puzzle. It might have been packed into the 2 containers that were never recovered. Given the recorded betrayals by the very people they trusted, it is highly probable that the coronet was quietly stolen early on, dismantled with pliers, and sold off piecemeal. As much as I want to entertain the comforting fantasy that those 497 diamonds and 18 pearls are still sleeping intact in some dark, forgotten safe, waiting to be returned to a museum, history is rarely that merciful. The tiara simply vanished into the ashes of the empire, leaving absolutely nothing behind. We began by looking at a simple, well-intentioned wedding gift, and we end in the quiet ashes of an empire. Tracing these journeys makes one thing incredibly clear. Diamonds themselves might be indestructible, but royal collections are astonishingly fragile. They are dismantled by tax bills, scattered by well-meaning generosity, outbid by private wealth, and erased by the sweeping tides of history. We often look at the Velvet Museum displays and marvel at the record-breaking auction prices. But perhaps the most valuable pieces in any royal vault are not the ones that fetch millions at Christie's. The truly priceless jewels are the ones a family somehow managed to keep safe, navigating the impossible hurdles of protocol, financial ruin, and political collapse. Selling a piece of heritage only takes a single strike of an auctioneer's hammer, but bringing it back can take more than a lifetime. I would love to hear your thoughts on these departures. Which lost tiara do you feel the absence of most acutely, whether we talked about it today or not? Is there a specific vanished piece you desperately wish you could see back in rotation, worn by one of the royal ladies today? Please share your favorites in the comments below. If you found this journey as fascinating and slightly heartbreaking as I did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so we can explore more of these hidden histories together. Thank you so much for joining me for tea today. The jewels themselves might be completely silent, but their stories certainly are not. I will see you in the next video.